This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masteringencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. All right, so I have no idea what's been going on, but if you guys have been with me, thanks very much for joining. Larry Bailey here. It's about 4 after. I'm just having a moment for this weekend. I thought I was talking to you for the last 3 minutes. I apologize. I didn't start the meeting. I let you into the room, but I didn't start the meeting. So I'm obviously a novice at this thing. So we meet every Tuesday at around 4 p.m. I normally start the meeting. I'm used to my Teams meeting, but in this event, I actually have to click the start. So very sorry about that. Today's topic is going to be all about how to run your organization on data to truly automate. One of the things that happened, of course, over the weekend is the update to not update for the 25.2.3. Hopefully you're aware of that. And if you're not, go ahead and check out the Resource Center for the information on that. And when we do talk about managing this, just as a reminder, you can run the version managing in manual mode. So in case you didn't know that, or if you are the kind of person who wants to move to running manual mode in the middle of your day, you can always go to admin tools, switch it to manual mode. And that's how you can actually double click the most recent hotfix and roll back if you want. So as an example, when they do roll out .3, if you don't like that and you want to roll back to .2, you can do that if you are in manual mode. So having said all that, the ICE conference was about 4 weeks ago. Show of hands for the other 26 some odd people that are here. Who went? Anybody go from here? And I'm going to bring this up for a reason. So we had about 9 or 10 folks show up who went to the ICE conference. Anybody want to, in the chat, anybody remember the drinking game word? Starts with an I, and it has to do with managing between both interfaces, both desktop and web interface. Interoperability. Luba gets the prize. Luba always wins, in case you guys didn't know. Luba wins. So interoperability, everybody has to take a drink. It's like shot skis, right? So the why is this important? Really, the main reason why this is important is because the idea, of course, is that both desktop and web revolve around one object, which is the loan object, right? It's a loan file. And the loan file contains data. And so this idea of how to run your organization on data to truly automate has to do with making sure that you take that perspective, that everything in your file is data. And I know it might sound rudimentary, right, or basic, but the idea is that if you're still thinking your loan file is based upon documents, you're wrong. You're really, really wrong. It's the data inside the documents that matters. And so one of the things that I talked about at the ICE conference to the folks who wanted to listen was the idea of data workflows. You know, historically, you've always heard me talk about workflow before technology, right? And so when we're working on this concept of, well, how do we make sure that we're taking advantage of everything throughout our workflow? We have to make sure the data is getting in the file, and then what do we do with it? Again, show of hands here. Kelly, I'm going to put your hand down just to make sure, because I think that was left over from the ICE thing. So the idea here is who's, again, question for the operations folks, especially, but who has folks checking or rechecking the data that somebody else put in the file just to make sure it's okay against the document that is in the E folder? Right? Everybody's hand should be up. Nobody's hand should be down, because every workflow that we've ever reviewed, thanks every guys for raising your hands, for reinforcing the fact that we all have people who are re-verifying what's on the PDF for what's in Encompass. It's just a thing. And it's a thing because we grew up as an industry on paper. And so what we always had to do was have the paper file, right? So if this is the paper file, pretend this is the file, right? And so we'd open it up and what would we have? We'd have a left side and a right side. And the left side would be your documents that need to be in the file or not, and the right side would be your underwriting credit file, and on top would be your loan approval document. If you've never underwritten off paper, that's what happened. You could find those ACO binders with the 6 tabs, between application, assets, income, credit, etc. You'll know what I'm talking about. Why is this important to talk about when we're talking about data? And it's because at October of this year, we have to have all of our vendors that we retrieve our services from need to be an Encompass Partner Connect. What does that mean? That means that the ability to go request and retrieve data has never been easier and has never been more incomplete. Yeah, Mark put in stare and compare, right? Stare and compare. And so why is this important? Is anybody, again, show of hands, who is you, just so everybody else can see, who is using something like electronic VOE or VOA, where you're doing whatever, it doesn't matter the service, but you're actually ordering out for verification of income or verification of assets, and you're retrieving that information into your system, right? Again, 7, 9, 10 people. How many people have business rules to make sure those data fields are unchangeable by every persona? Do you have those rules? And if you don't have those rules, why not? And the reality is, the reason why you probably don't have those rules is because nobody told you to do it. And so I don't know if you guys caught, like, I don't know who watches LinkedIn. Like, I'm usually watching LinkedIn for stuff. And today UWM announced publicly that they've partnered with Google Analytics to basically increase their underwriters from 6 files a day to 14 files a day. And everybody's like, ooh, it's AI. And I looked at it and I said, that's not AI, that's data management. And so, good news, everybody that wants to do this at their company can do this today. So what I try to teach people, and what I want you to take away from this conversation today, is, do you trust the source of the data? So several years ago, I'm exaggerating. Let's say, actually, it has been 7. About 7-ish years ago, I was working for a company, and one of our clients needed to basically somehow automate their appraisal process. And what my job was, I was on this task. I had to create a method to ingest an appraisal XML and to map that into Encompass one for one to go against another piece of technology. And so what we ended up with was, I created I mapped the XML nodes. If you've ever taken apart an XML, it's really neat if you're into this kind of stuff, because the data is in there. If you look at the PDF that we look at when we think of appraisals, we think of a PDF, but it's not really a PDF. It's really an XML file. The XML file is what gets created by the software, Alamode in this example, which gets created by the software, which was done by the appraiser who physically keyed in the data or sourced the data from somewhere else. So if you think about this, the appraiser creates the data to which we rely upon for the underwriting, right? We know this. It goes to AUS, everything else. But what happens when we get the PDF? We have to retype in the data into Encompass, historically speaking, which leads to problems, which is why we need double checkers to make sure that the person at your company typed it in properly, right? It's the reason why the underwriter has to check if there's as is, or et cetera, all this other stuff, the value, county, the address, all this other stuff, right? But what if you had the data from the appraiser directly into your Encompass loan file, Well, you do now with EPC. And it's not just the appraisal, all these other services that we all integrate with, they all have data mappings. And if you have the data mapping coming into your loan file, why would you ever let anybody adjust the data? You wouldn't. So that's what I'm talking about here today, guys. There's third parties that are out there that in the past built entire infrastructures to read the XML files behind the E folder because you can't really do anything without third party tech to read XML. And I appreciate that, but those times are behind us. We now have EPC, so I can get the data directly into my loan file. So can you. Any admin can. So what I want you to take away from today is start to look at your data workflow. Start to look at the data source. And if your data source is from somebody at your company keying it in manually, start to ask the question, why are we doing it that way? Why are we doing it that way? And it doesn't mean that you have to abandon it, but you do have to decide on who is going to be responsible source for that data input. And if you want to have one double check, totally fine with it. But the idea is that you're going to want to make sure that you ask the question of where did that data come from, and how can I make sure that I don't need somebody to double check it. All right, let's talk about something else that everybody has to do, which is called funding. We all have to fund loans, and we all have to make sure that the money's going to the right place. And so, does anybody use an approved title or an approved funding agent workflow in their company, where in order to get somebody approved as a title agent, they have to go through a process and you do verification of the ABA number and the account number for where the money is going. There's actually businesses that have been created to solve for this, like Funding Shield. Okay, it's just one. And that comes to mind because I just saw their email earlier today. Thank you for raising your hand. For those that aren't doing this, why aren't you doing it? Now, you don't have to pay a third party, but why are you not using an approved funding workflow, approved funding agent workflow? It doesn't take much, of course. And the idea here is that when you have an approved process like the funding agent, what's the source? Typically, when you use an approved funding agent workflow, you've got somebody at the corporate office who is a trusted individual, and you use a business contact category that you can create called approved title agent or approved funding agent or something like that. And then through your user groups, of course, you're allowing other people to view that public business contact group, but not edit it. And you can then map those fields, those custom category fields, into the loan file for your paperwork or whatever it is that you have to send out for your funding request or your funding information to your warehouse line. Assuming that nobody else on the warehouse line doesn't double check it, which they probably should and do, the idea is that internally, all of those fields that information is being synchronized to in the loan file should be view only to every persona, except for the ones that have to add that to the file. And again, we're all admins, right? So we can do all kinds of stuff with making the actual field view only, but then using field triggers to populate over through ignore validation errors to make sure that happens, not directly just from the business contact. So I'm giving you some rapid fire ideas in today because I want you to start looking, and not everybody has to be a fan of the matrix or even know what that is, but I want you to start looking at your data. I want you to really start understanding that this entire workflow that we use, that everybody uses, is data focused. And I want you to start thinking about in your persona access rules, who actually needs to not only edit that data field, but also modify, and therefore not double check. So for those that are just getting here, because I know a bunch of people just came on, what I've been talking about for the last several minutes has been about looking at the source of your data and carrying that data validation through your workflow so people aren't re-verifying what has already been proven to be a valid source data. That's really the big focus. All right. So now that we've kind of got that, by the way, if anyone has any questions, please put it in chat or Q&A. Like, this is not just me professing, right? These are ideas that we see for both large and small organizations. You don't have to be a big super company to implement these kinds of things. You can be closing 20 loans a month or less. It's just a good policy to make sure that people aren't confused. And you don't need these series of double checks, rechecks, or even comparison forms for this data from the first time it was entered in the file and proven to be accurate from the source versus later. So then how do you run your company? Is anybody using workflow rules yet? Like, reliably? Show of hands, 42 people in here. I'm hoping like 40 raise their hand that you're using workflow rules in your day. Lisa's like, I'm trying. So Gabe's working on it. Guys, listen, this is new tech, right? So it's internal. It requires an understanding of how to use it. But remember that you can only, yeah, I said reliability, Sarah, or reliably, right? We're using workflow rules reliably. So the goal here is that if you know you have the information that's reliable, which is key number one, now you can make sure that based upon that information, you can go through and start to use things like workflow rules to do automation without having to wait for somebody else to re-verify something. You can use where if the data comes in, why do you need, and again, I'm going to pick on appraisals because it's a big topic forever for every company, as long as you don't get a PIW. But if you get the appraisal in, why do we need an underwriter to review it or an appraisal department to review it before it's acceptable? So as an example, let's say the value comes in low. What do we want to do with that? Now, some companies still send a copy to the borrower regardless of it because that's what their policy is. Other companies want to like send a notice to somebody to say, hey, it came in under value. Let's go review it to see if we can do something before we have to accept it, kind of a thing. And this is where you can get involved with workflow tasks. This is where you can use workflow rules to spin up your workflow task. And even if you're not using web UI, remember, workflow tasks appear in both desktop and web because it's interoperable. But you can go through and make sure that this data is now, when you have the reliable data, you can now fire your workflow rules to continue your process map. So when, yeah, drinking, thank you, Sarah. So when you go through how to run your organization, like how to truly automate, if your company is of the mindset where you're tired of spending extra money, your business is tired of spending extra money because you've got people kind of regurgitating the same work in different parts of the workflow. The reason why that's happening is because no one trusts the data. It's the reality. It's not like they don't trust each other. They don't trust the data. And so your job as an admin, from my perspective, is get the data to be trustworthy. The moment that you can make that piece of data, that field, be trustworthy and it travels, and when I say trustworthy, that means everybody believes that that is accurate. There's no need to re-verify it. That allows your entire team to be free to focus on other things and spend their time worrying about other things. Throughout. So leveraging workflow rules. Obviously, you can still use desktop rules, right? Because you're going to need persona access to fields, business rules to mark things as view only, depending on how things happen. So there's all kinds of workflow opportunities to figure out which rules, whether they're workflow rules or desktop settings rules to manage in your day. That's going to be up to you. When it comes to other parts of the loan file, now that we're talking about data, let's talk about SLA evaluation. Let's talk about how you can see if there's true efficiencies in your workflow? Is anybody using anything that gives you reliable data on SLA, whether or not your teams are meeting SLAs, or even what your general efficiencies are? Is anybody doing that work actively? Again, there's about 40 something people in here. Give you a second. I'm not seeing any hands. All right. Luba's got a hand up. You using touch counts, Luba? Mark's saying not doing it well. Angie's doing okay, cool. So again, I don't know if you guys are Motivity. Okay, cool. So Heather's using ServiceNow, which is great. Kelly's like, I need to do it. So part of again, for me, for 2025 with our clients, when we go through our workflow, you guys have heard me talk about workflow ad nauseum here. The idea of Luba's got user touches. So there's a third-party provider out there that does user touches, which is a great tool. I've used it myself to try to help. We're working with another partner that actually gets into true data, like field level data, to really understand who's doing what and when did certain things happen in the workflow to determine reliability as well as to determine efficacy of that workflow. So in English, if we know when a file hits 3142 app date, how long is it taken to get those disclosures out? And is there a correlation to loan type, loan officer, those kinds of things? When did we have e-consent percentage of the time compared to when the disclosures were sent? Because that's going to determine probability of needing to put something in USPS. Or if you use ICE fulfillment, that you're going to pay $10, right? What's the probability of that? If we talk about processing the files, how many loan conditions do we have on the initial underwrite versus how many conditions were still in existence when that file was submitted for clear to close? These are all things that your operations management would drool over if you had proper data. The problem is, even if you have the technology to interpret what I'm just talking about, it's the data that's the problem, because you're not there yet. So when I talk about, running your organization on data, we started with getting reliable source data from your service providers or your third parties. It then turned into, okay, well, how can I use that data to now reliably automate my workflow and leverage workflow rules? Again, native tech. We're not talking about third-party tech, but native tech. And then it gets into, okay, well, now how do I actually evaluate the efficacy of my workflow to see if there's any opportunities to maybe leverage a third-party tech if native doesn't support it? Or maybe I'm using a particular vendor that's resulting in a lot of extra work that nobody even realized. I know it sounds really heady, and I know it sounds like a lot of work, but truthfully, if you do this in steps, it's progressive. It's very progressive, and this could be a couple of year project, right? It depends on your size of your organization. But I want to reinforce that not everything needs to be a widget. Not everything needs to be a setting, whether it's native or outside of Encompass. A lot of this is mindset. And when I go through, again, these workflow reviews and I sit down with the executive team to say, why do we have these re-verification processes and these extra QC processes? A lot of times the execs argue with me that it exists. They don't think it exists, and I show them. It's right here. It's in the recording. It's in the workflow. And other times they're basically forfeiting their ability to do better. They're just saying, listen, that's the mortgage business. That's the way it is, and it's not. Lynn adds in chat here, number of suspended files. That's a great one too. If you use a suspended workflow, because not everybody does, but if you use a suspended workflow, how do you know what your pull-through rate is? Right? Lynn, quick question. Do you use a counteroffer workflow with your suspended? Do you use counteroffers in your workflow? That's number one. Also, Lynn, for you, I'm picking on you, sorry, but Lynn, for you, do you do true pre-approvals where the underwriter spends time on underwriting that file before you get a property? Matter of fact, is anybody, not just Lynn, is anybody on the call using a true pre-approval with an underwriter review that's pending a property? So you got 5 or 6. Lisa says no. Okay, so 5 or 6, right, out of 40 something. If you're raising your hands up and down. By the way, thanks for doing that, everybody. Sean says yes. So 7. So think about this: when you go through and you're doing a pre-approval, whether you're using a credit approval field or a custom field or underwriter sign-off field. I found out today somebody was using that 2304. My point is, what's your pull through on that work? Is it worth it? Right? These are the kinds of data moments that you can have to go back to your team, to your company, and say, "Hey guys, I think I found some extra money. Would you be interested in saving some extra money that we probably could use somewhere else?" I'm an enormous proponent on giving you the ability to go back to your management or your leadership or your board of directors or whatever to say, hey, listen, I think I found some money. Would you like to know more? Get them to listen to you. Get them to listen to your ideas for what you see. You can have a moment of empowerment. It's never done me wrong if you do the work before you go in that call or that room. Um, Lynn says no true pre-approval. Okay, thanks, Lynn, for answering my question. So to get there, though, you've got to start with what I said in the very beginning, and you've got to source your valid data. So is there anyone quick question? You might have to type in here in chat. I'm watching chat, so if you want to use chat, that's great. But is there any particular problem that anyone's had when you've tried to do something like this in the past and you've fallen flat? Something's failed where you've tried to actually get source data and it just proved to be an impossible task for you, or you felt like even if you got the data, it didn't matter to operations. They still wanted to double check anyway. Anybody ever had that? Uh, yeah. And if you haven't had that, thanks everybody for they wanted to validate the validation, right, Sarah? Yeah. And so Heather's like every time. Kristen's like, yes. And so the reason why this is happening is because Luba said check the check or checking the check. Yeah, like all these things, right? And so this is going to be your highest priority. If you truly want to advocate for your company to move forward and leverage everything that Native Encompass is giving you at your fingertips, you've got to get this method of relying upon the data that's from the source to be acceptable. Does everybody remember when Day One Certainty came out? I feel like it was 5 or 6 years ago. It might have been longer. But when Day One Certainty came out, the idea was revolutionary, quote unquote. It was, hey, we're going to get the borrowers to enter their bank statement creds or their income employment creds or whatever it is for work number. And we're going to get the data directly from that vendor, and we're going to go and put that directly into AUS. We're going to get a special number, right? We've got this in Encompass, the field, and that special number is going to be like a BitLocker code. And so when we run AUS, we're going to pass that special number, and Fannie Freddie is going to go back to that vendor and get the data directly to go into AUS. If you're doing that, why would income ever be editable in a file? It wouldn't. But yet we still have situations where we get a PDF in and somebody's making sure that's the income in the file. There's an actual happening. So guys, I feel like I might be belaboring the point here. Hopefully everybody gets it, but those are real life examples that I'm sure you can find in your workflow like right now. And I would always encourage you to start with something that's very easy to manage and is not too big. So sources of income, sources of assets are easy targets because if you're using that, there it goes. We can use flood. How about that? We can use fraud. How about that? Where, again, why am I looking for it? Here's another fun one. FHA connection. Is anybody still have their underwriter require a PDF copy of the FHAC printout to show that the case number is what it is and the CAVRs is what it is? Right? Everybody? Yeah. And so why? Because they don't trust the data. That's why. And so if you're using the native functionality, which Yeah, and Sean's like, even some of our investors want it. And this is so when it comes to investor requirements, this is where if I'm on the phone with the investor, if I'm in secondary, I call the investor and say, hey, listen, our workflow is to not generate a PDF. Guys, you don't need a PDF. Like, why do you think you need a PDF? Because you don't. We're rep and warning. This is the number. This is how it went through. This is how it's closing. If you're brokering and they want it because they want to make sure you got the case number assignment, that's something different. But if you're the lender, you're rep and warranting this, especially with your own eagle. It's just stupid. It's just, again, old habits die hard. So you got to fight. But my point for bringing this up is that when you go through Encompass and the FHA tracking, you can order not only your case, but you can also order your refi authorization. You get all the information back in Encompass. Where people struggle is there's no PDF. And again, this is us living in that paper file. Remember that paper file I did at the beginning of the show or episode? I'm calling it a show. Beginning of the episode. Um, it's muscle memory. It's everybody that has at least 10 years experience all worked on paper, gang. Few exceptions, but mostly everybody working in the industry 10 years ago worked on paper. Um, so I want you to do as a homework assignment as we wrap up today's as you have any questions, by the way. Wait, somebody's waiting in the lobby? No, no one's waiting in the lobby. Oh, Ash, you've got your hand up. So as we take away as we do some takeaways for today, I want you to really pick on a source of data that you know is reliable, and I want you to take that. I'll tell you this, the one thing that ICE did really well, and I hope everybody appreciated this at this year's ICE show. ICE was all about making sure you took away something you can do. And so at the session that I co-hosted there with the group with Frank and Matt along with Kayleigh and Sam from ICE, was I want you to do one thing, right? And the one thing I said when I was up there on stage, I said, go do a scheduler, go do a notification template, go do something, but do it and get the experience. And so with this topic, I want you to go find one data source that's 100% reliable. Pick flood, pick fraud. If you've got income, pick income, but maybe that's hard for your team. I don't know. Maybe you use maybe you look at your funding approval process. So I want you to take those. I want you to take those opportunities, and I want you to do one of them. Show your business that that information is reliable, and stop everybody from rechecking that piece of information. And then once you get through that one, do another one. And I'm promising you that once you show your team how reliable that is, and that they don't need to waste time looking at that anymore because it's a reliable source, they'll stop. Case in point, when an underwriter underwrites a file, does the processor re-verify the income? Does the closer re-verify the income? No. But they do with the property address. So it's a weird situation that we deal with in mortgage. We're kind of screwy in that regards where we don't make sense a lot of time, and it's mostly because we don't stop to think, hey, we don't have to do that anymore because we're confident in the level of this data. Again, I'm going to pick on UWM because they are the one to pick on. The reason why they're the monsters they are is because they do the work, they verify the data, and they never look at it again because it's reliable. Nobody can screw around with that data. And I want you to take the weight those lessons and bring it to your company, and realize that you can do this with your own native Encompass right now. And if you're not using EPC for all your vendors yet, what's your problem? Make that happen. And then you can leverage the data mapping. You can leverage the data mapping in there so that you can take advantage of again, what we've been talking about today. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any scenarios that you want me to go over? Or if you want to come, if you want me to unmute you so you can talk through a situation that you have, now would be the time to raise your hand if you do. Does anyone want to challenge me? I'm up for a good challenge. Anyone want to challenge me that you think it's impossible? Maybe you're like, dude, that sounds great for you and these other companies, but my company, never going to happen. Okay. Well, that tells me that you do believe that it's possible. And yes, it's going to be hard work. And that's why I said start small. You got to show somebody that it's possible. And take care, Lou, but good luck with the kiddo, that it's possible. And again, I promise you that it will happen. Um, Replay them this presentation today of me talking about this. And if anybody wants me to show you how to do it, ask me for how to do it. I'll put a video up in the community, or we'll do a one-on-one or whatever. I want to see you do this. So I believe in you. I know you can. But if you have any questions of how to get it done, let me know. That's all I got for you today, gang. It's a short one, sweet one, because data doesn't have to be something you keep talking about forever. Get it from the source, lock it down, close more loans with less resources. Lynn got me with something talking about data. I hope to get feedback from the people who are using ICE DDA. Lynn, what would you like to know about ICE document and data analyzers? I can tell you all the kind of good stuff and bad stuff. Do you want me to take you off of do you want me to ask a specific question? Oh, is it accurate? It is highly reliable. I don't know what accurate means. When it comes to when it comes to document imaging, it is highly reliable. I will tell you this for anybody asking about, is it worth to investigate? Should you do it? So here's what it does, right? It brings in a PDF blob, and based upon how you can so it recognizes documents. It's been training. Remember, it used to be Capsilon, then AIQ, and now DDA. So its learning experience is superb. And so it knows images of documents because it's been processing millions and millions and millions of documents over the last 10 years plus. So what you have to do is you have to then marry your eFolder document name to what it knows it to be. Pay stub's easy, right? But what do you do with a 1040S? Or what do you do with homeowners insurance? It knows all these things. But what do you call that document in your eFolder? You have to map it. And so that part is as accurate as your mapping is and as the quality of the PDF blob is. So if somebody took a PDF and scrunched it up and then got it wet and then scanned it, yeah, your reliability is going to be lower than if it was a clean copy. Makes sense, right? Now, as far as the A part, the analyzers, the feedback I've heard, I've never personally experienced this with DDA, but the feedback I've heard from other clients that have used it is, again, it's reliable. It's data, so you can't get too excited about data. It's either reliable or it's not. It's either it works or it doesn't. And the answer is yes, it's reliable. Now, ICE did roll out some new features of its analyzers. I would tell you to get a hold of your ICE team for more information. It's new, so I don't know about that. So Lisa says, what about the issue with Encompass printer juggling data on import? So if you ever have a situation where Encompass takes a PDF and then gives you a lot of wingding crap on your image that you see on screen, that's it does happen. So typically, so first of all, Lisa, are you using new doc viewer or are you using old doc viewer? Do you have a mountain and a sun on your thing? The new, right? Yeah. So what I've been told on that is that when you do get that, it's so Candace kind of hit it there. It's a Microsoft setting. I do know that's not a it's not a conversion issue. I would say I don't know about a global answer on that, Lisa, but Candace, is there like a knowledge article on that, if you know off the top of your head? I know it does come up because I know what you're talking about, Lisa. But that's got nothing to do with DDA, truthfully. DDA, when you upload, just so again, Lynn, just so you know, for everybody, when you put something into the E folder, that becomes a landing zone, and you program DDA to go fetch anything that goes into there. One of the biggest problems that people have with DDA in particular, and again, it's any software that manages your E folder for you. If somebody loads in a document that they think is a pay stub, but it's actually not a pay stub. It's actually a bank statement. So they load it into a pay stub. They tie it to the pay stub condition for fulfillment, and then DDA runs, and poof, it disappears because that PDF actually belongs in the bank statement, which is not tied to the pay stub condition that you just fulfilled. That's a user experience that people lament about. They get upset about. And that's the user error, right? And so there's those kinds of workflow problems that exist when it comes to things like DDA. But it's not unique. It's just the user put something in a spot that it didn't belong. So Candace is putting some notes on there, Lisa, and for others if you're getting the Wingding upload thing. So yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, it does look really stupid weird. And so I know it's a known issue, and there is what Candace has more direct experience on this than I do. I don't see it that often, but when I do see it, we typically it's typically an old doc viewer problem, and it's because somebody had Encompass up when they went to update their Adobe, and it conflicted with the printer drivers for the conversion, the local conversion. Okay. Angie said they were having issues before, but the new install, you mean the new Encompass install, right? Angie, you uninstalled Encompass and then reinstalled it. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So as a reminder, there is a new installation, new Encompass installation protocol. So hopefully you're using that. When you do install Encompass, you're not using an old file. If you need the new file, make sure you grab it from the Resource Center. I think it's on the release notes links too for the new install link. Same thing goes with the current Encompass system requirements. It's a brand new page. The old PDF is gone, dead, and ICE put out a brand new, nicely updated, very well-defined minimum system requirements for Encompass Desktop and Encompass Web. And this is where I was happy to see, although I'm not happy about what it says, I was happy to see that ICE called out that Encompass Desktop is not something that will run on an ARM-based processor. So is what it is. Got to use an Intel chip or an Intel-based chip, something like that. It will not work on ARM-based processors. Like your Apple MacBooks are ARM-based processors. Your Snapdragons, if you get like a new laptop or Surface tablet that's running on Snapdragon, ain't going to work because that's ARM-based tech. So be very careful about what kind of computers your chips have in your computers, I should say, for Encompass. Check with your IT teams if you're not quite sure what the hell I'm talking about. All right, gang. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming today. That's all I got. If you have any questions about running your organization on data, let me know. I'm here for you. See you now. See you in the community. Bye.